Hello, good evening, kia ora. Well, I'm coming to you a bit later than normally, aren't I, for you folks in, well, Australia and New Zealand. Sorry about that, but daylight saving ticked over here a couple of weeks ago, or was it only 1 week? Gosh, I can't remember. I'm not sure whether time flies or it stands still when you're in lockdown and like everybody around the world not moving around and having the life we're used to. But I am back and I'm alone tonight. As much as I loved having Margaret with me last time we chatted, I get to fly solo again tonight. So here goes, folks. Let me just explain the comments I made in notifying you that I was coming an hour later in Australia and New Zealand. I had a couple of messages from people who didn't quite get my sense of humour. I remember many, well, probably decades ago now, when well, daylight saving was being talked about as coming into being, and some of the arguments put up for it not to happen. I think we were actually in New Zealand at the time, so one of them will make a lot of sense to you. But one of them was, well, if we had an extra hour of daylight every day, it would just fade the drapes and the curtains quicker. I'll leave that one with you. But the next one was, and this is my reference to cows, that the cows would be confused by having an extra hour of daylight and that it could interfere with their milking. I'm pretty sure that one must have come from New Zealand. So that's what I was referring to and being a little bit oblique and showing my age too. But let's move on from that. The years ticking by, and I was talking with the publishers about these talks that I'm giving and how many more to do before the year ends and at what pace. And so heads up, I will be back in 3 weeks' time. I've got a certain book I have to write. I'm a little bit busy with that. But I'm going to start coming to you for the next 3 times we speak between now and Christmas. And I'll have somebody else with me, a special guest. Because I think you need to hear from other people, not just me. And these other people have got some amazing things to talk to us about. But anyway, let me start having a chat to you tonight. We're pondering what it was I wanted to particularly talk about and address tonight. Not that I feel like I need to, in any way come up with topics. And, well, I've got my books, and so you've probably heard enough about them. But there's some aspects to them and some of the things that happen with regard to them that I felt that, I think I want to talk about this particular topic. Well, there's two of them. Because two things happened to me last Friday within a matter of hours of each other. And they really left me thinking and pondering, wow, the pain, the resilience, what we are going through and how we are in fact coping with it. Now, there may or may not be some people watching this who linked into me last Friday late morning in a library here in Melbourne, about I suppose 30 kilometres away from where I am, but in a part of Melbourne that is like me, also in lockdown. And this beautiful library talk I gave, the librarian moderated it, and I think there was 25, 30 people who were all zoomed in, and I could see all their beautiful faces, and we chatted away for an hour. I gave them sort of free range for them to ask questions, and the moderator was asking questions on behalf of people. She muted them all so that we could not have a lot of chat going on at once. And that was lovely. That went really, really well. I could tell by the reactions of the people that were listening. And at that point, that's all they were listening, that they were totally on board with what I was saying. And maybe the section talking to your elders resonated with them. I suspect that they have, for many of them, got grandchildren and are in that category of being an elder like I am. But here's what happened at the end. They were all unmuted, ostensibly to say thank you and to wave goodbye to me and to each other. And that happened, and a few people started clicking off, just leaving of their own volition. But one lady started talking, and then another person started talking. And with just an open mic between all of us, I think there were 14 people stayed for the next 20 minutes or so. And what we talked about was the resilience that Lali and Gita and Silka and other survivors of tragedy and trauma, well, they had a resilience about them. And did resilience now no longer exist in our world and in our lifetime, given that we are not living the kind of lives that conflict and wars produce? And one lady, I'm going to say her name Dolly, and just on the off chance she's watching, she said, I've been in lockdown and I live alone now for many, many weeks, months. And I think I found a resilience in myself that I did not know I have. And we all looked at her and we went, yeah, I know we complain and we carry on about how hard it is. And even people outside of Melbourne, they're still not having the access to what they want to do and people they want to see. I do hope my grandchildren and son and daughter-in-law in Brisbane want to see me as much as I want to see them. But it brought up this whole subject of how will history record this extraordinary time that we are now living in? And it is extraordinary. And it is unique just about to every living human being. I don't think there'd be too many people around who were at the turn of last century for the Spanish flu. But yes, resilience. But not only the resilience that we have, and we started thinking, will history record what the bureaucrats, the politicians, and the academics decide to write down and record about how things were for us? And when I think about the stories that have been written, the majority of them, shall we say, up until recently, about, for example, the Holocaust, they have had that academic and perspective and that global look at the event. And here was Dolly and these others saying how they get by on a daily basis. And also what they were saying was how much they enjoy these chats that they were now having. Well, they don't normally have chats, but when they come onto an event like the libraries organise and that I partake in, and I've got a few more coming up, that in many cases, this is the only time they see another face. That they look down there into their computer and they see 30 other faces just like them, all in their own homes and with no one else to look at and to talk to. So we had this amazing, what I call sort of open mic conversation. And we all had decided that, yeah, we are a resilient bunch. You are to every one of us. We have to be. And here we are being tested. But who's going to record how we as individuals got through the pandemic of 2020? I'd like to think that we won't have to wait for 50 or 60 years for writers and authors to come along and then go and ask the individual stories. What did you do? Now, one of the other ladies there said that her daughter had given her a book for her to write. It was a journal designed for a mother to write to her daughter. I'll get it right the right way. And she was finding sort of comfort and a sense of well-being in writing down her own thoughts and parts of her life that she wanted her daughter to know. But then the question was, well, what's wrong with other people knowing it too? Because this is you identifying yourself as an individual right here, right now. And these are the individual stories we need to tell about the people living alone who don't leave their home. And they're not just elderly, by the way. Many people live alone. But then there's the mums and the dads who are having to find themselves as teachers and homeschooling. And I know from personal experience with my family that has been a really trying, difficult thing to do. And I see the children themselves, how, yeah, well, of course it's their parents. And so when they ask them to sit down and do their maths or to write a sentence, they're not going to have the same obedience that they get, obviously, in a classroom. But that takes a toll on everybody, not just the parents who are trying so hard to do their best. And to all you mums and dads here in Melbourne whose little taggers went back to school today after 16 weeks. I think it's 16 weeks is what I read. Congratulations. I know my daughter and son-in-law, well, they harked back to at the end of January when their little man started school for the very first time, and that sense of sadness of losing your child who's starting school now without you. And I guess tears were shed on that day by many, many parents at the first day of school for a little 5-year-old. I think today there may have been a few tears as well, but I'm also thinking there were tears of how quickly can I get home and get a mimosa in my hands? I'm going to have a nap this afternoon. I'm going to sit down and binge on something on TV. Well, you can do that if you haven't got a couple of other little ones at home, but there was that sense of, well, relief not only for the child now getting back into the classroom, but for themselves. But who is going to record that? How can we find individuals and tell their stories like I told Lully's and not make it about people that we know? We don't want to know how the Kardashians got through. I'm not even really sure who they are, but I've heard the name somewhere. And we don't want to know and read in decades to come how our politicians coped with making decisions. Yeah, we'll leave that for the academics, and that can be studied in schools and universities. But we need to be telling the stories of Dolly and of the other people who are living alone, of the people living as couples and not going out and finding that all of a sudden living with a partner 24/7, where you may not have done that for decades because one or other or both of you were going out to work and then both of you no longer are. Again, a different set of scenarios. And it needs to be recorded because that is the true stories of how we coped for COVID-19 2020. So I just thought I'd throw that out there at you. And in doing that, it gives me the perfect opportunity to also now say to you, for any of you who want to write it down and want to share it, then please, I would love to have it sent to the website, yourstoriesofhope.com. Let me know and let others know how you have dealt with living alone, teaching children, having to be with someone that you're not used to spending 24 hours a day with, whatever your circumstances are. And you don't have to be finding a sense of hope in it. Don't do that. Just start recording your story of what I'm going to call resilience. Let us see who you are. And we don't have to do anything with it, and we will possibly get back in touch with you, any of you who choose to do this, and just see what we can make of these stories and what we can do to share them with others, only ever with your permission, of course. So that was my Friday late morning into lunchtime event. And I was left just quite, knocked about afterwards and very overwhelmed that this spontaneous chat just happened. And the librarian who was moderating the session, she said it had never happened before. It just spontaneously happened. Instead of just saying goodbye and hitting the leave button, we started talking and talking. And by the way, I didn't do much of the talking. Everybody else just shared amongst themselves. I do hope that those people, they all live in a particular part of Melbourne, that when they can, that they may find a way to come together in person and now share these stories in person with each other. Well, I think I had some lunch, and I can't remember what happened after that, but I know a couple of hours later, I opened an email, and it was from Jane. Jane is the publicist who works for me here in Australia, and she gets me speaking engagements. She arranges interviews with the media. She arranges for different media and print outlets to write parts of my story, generally with my help, but she'd received a request for an extract from my book. So I didn't have to do anything more. This particular online media company or media outlet, I'm not quite sure what you call them, they just wanted to print an extract. Because of their, they came from an area of family, and it was suggested to them that part of the storyline in listening to your children would have been appropriate. They then sent to Jane, who sent to me the extract that they had taken from my book. And Jane wrote and said to me, "How do you feel about them printing this? They tell me that up to 3 million people may read it." And so I opened the attachment and started reading what it was they had chosen. And it was the story in my book with a vignette about my daughter and son-in-law. And well, yeah, what they went through after the birth of their third little man, just over 12 months ago. I think he's about 13 months old now. But this played out when he was 3 or 4 months old. And it's in there, it's in Stories of Hope. It's my son-in-law and I not appreciating and realizing that this beautiful young woman in our lives was having and showing very severe symptoms of postnatal depression. And all our attempts to help her were not working, and we were just not reading her properly, and we were not interpreting her silent cries for help. Now, when I wanted to write that, I asked my daughter and son-in-law, could I do that? And they agreed wholeheartedly. But here I was again on Friday afternoon reading this vignette again. And I probably hadn't read it since I wrote it, and the book went away to be published several months back. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. The power of it, the impact of it. And it was affecting me. And I'm trying to rationalize, why is this happening? Why is this becoming so painful for me all over again? And maybe I shall say no. So I started writing back to Jane saying, no, I don't want them to do that. Tell them to pick another part of the book, and they're welcome to have anything else. I got the email half written, and then I paused and went and made a cup of tea. That's what I do when I need to think. While I was having that cup of tea, I pondered the possibility of it doing some good. If somebody, just one person, reads it who has no intentions of buying my book, but they read it in this other media outlet. And so without even asking permission, I just wrote back to Jane and I said, tell them to print. I think that I just wrote back the word publish and sent it off. Now, later that afternoon, and nobody in Melbourne is going to hear this because I did not go round to my daughter and son-in-law's house and have a birthday dinner with my son-in-law and my 3 grandchildren. Okay, I didn't. But while I was there, and after we'd had dinner and the little folks had gone to bed, I said to my daughter and son-in-law, I need to tell you that your story, while you gave permission for it to be printed in a book, well, it's probably gone around the world a little bit more, few more times than a local Australian online magazine. But it is going to be reproduced in this particular online magazine, and there'll be plenty of people possibly reading it, and some of them may even recognise you because it's geared. This online magazine is geared to families. And my daughter and son-in-law just kind of looked at each other and they said, do you think it can do some good? Do you think it might help somebody? I said, I don't know, but the possibility exists that it will. And they both said, if it can help one person to know that they are not alone, that so many of us go through this pain of having a little baby and the sleep deprivation, the hormone rages, all those things that come along and interfere with how the mother is feeling and coping. Then, of course, they said, print it wherever it needs to be printed and published. So I'm so grateful that they have again given their story permission to be published elsewhere. And I then remembered well, it was an interview I did into London, oh, possibly about a month ago. And the young journalist who Zoomed me like this to do the interview, she was writing it up in a magazine. No, actually, it was one of the newspapers in London. And this is not what she's writing about. She's writing about the book and book reviewing it and writing about and getting the story. But before we began the interview, we'll call it that, she said to me, she said, I have to tell you that the part of your book that impacted me the most. And she started crying. And I said to her, you all right? And she said, yeah. She said, but I have to tell you that I read what you wrote about your daughter and son-in-law. She said, that was my sister 2 years ago. That was my sister. And we had no idea. We missed it all. If only we had have known what was going on with her, she said, that we may have been able to help her sooner. And she's quite distressed about it, and we talked about it before we began the interview. And she now felt, she said, I know that any friend or family member of mine who has an infant, a newborn, whether it's their first, their second, their 10th, she said to look out for those telltale signs of things not being well with the mother. And I thought that was just lovely. And after we chatted about it, we then got on and had the interview. And oh, I'm not even sure if I've read what she wrote. I must have a word to them in London and see if I got her article. I presume I did. So these were two things that happened very quickly to me and within a matter of hours of each other last Friday. But it occurs to me, if things are happening to me like this, and leave the book aside, that's neither here nor there. You out there are in touch with friends and family, if not in person, if not at work, then on Zoom or on phone, however. We are still in touch with other people. And are we hearing from them any sort of, not only cries for help, but it's a perfect time to listen to them and just see if there's anything going on with them. And maybe you can bring up and discuss with them, how are you not only coping, but do you see and feel a sense of resilience in yourself? Do you think that you're a better in terms of coping and looking for ways to either be on your own, be with your partner, not be at work when you should be? All these things that happen in our lives and are not happening like they should. And it occurs to me, as I say, that this is a brilliant chance to, well, if you don't want to use the word hope, because some people find out there is no hope. I mean, people are feeling quite hopeless right now, and they don't want to be told, find some hope, look for something. So perhaps just flip it and say, you're a resilient one, you always have been. And we really all are. We just don't ever tag ourselves like that. All through our lives, we exhibit and we show resilience to whatever is currently going on with us, but we just don't recognize that that's what's going on, and that's who we are becoming because of how we deal with whatever it is that's being thrown at us, good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's pretty much what I wanted to chat to you about tonight. The resilience. Resilience in yourself, resilience in other people. And maybe if you can't come up with anything in yourself, look to that person that you know that is dear to you, the family member, the friend, the neighbour, and use that word with them and just say to them, you're just showing so much resilience in how you're dealing with what's going on. Whether you're in lockdown or not, it doesn't matter. You're still compromised everywhere in the world with what you can do for different reasons. So let's throw a new word into the mix, is what I'm saying. Hope, and now resilience. I don't want to go on any more about those right now. I think I've hammered you along hard enough. I hope that, I love using that word, don't you? Gosh, we throw it out there in every other sentence, don't we? But for me, the next few weeks are going to be spent, and this is for my publishers, head down, bum up, And I'm having an amazing chit chat tomorrow morning, and I don't mind who knows about it, but it is going to include my wonderful manager here in Australia, Benny in Melbourne. But these two amazing women who are my publishing editors, they are the people who are going to make my words jump off the page. Margaret, who you met last week and lives in London, and Jennifer Enderlin. She's my other half in New York at St. Martin's Press. And the four of us tomorrow, no, Wednesday morning, are going to get together on Zoom and thrash out the finer details of this amazing story that I'm writing about the three sisters. Hey, listen, but here's something else too that happened about getting to know people. And I mentioned that a woman last Friday said that her daughter had given a book saying things I want to tell my daughter. I suppose 10 days or so ago, I had a video WhatsApp chit chat into Tel Aviv to Livia. Beautiful, lovely. Are you 94 yet, Livia? I think you might be. Livia and her daughter, Dorrit. Now, I'd written to Dorrit and I'd asked her, can you ask these questions of your mum? And it's easier if I provide the questions that I want to get answers to from Livia, not one-to-one like I am now, but here's the questions, and then we link up and have a chat. And she's had time to think about what I'm asking her, and then she can give me the answers. Well, I had this amazing chat with her. It went for about an hour and a half. I'm sitting there holding up my phone, sort of looking at her, and she's talking back. But here's something that Dorrit said. Some of the questions I'd asked her to ask her mum were, can you find out what was Livia like as a child? Did she have long hair? What did she have for breakfast, lunch and dinner? What were her favourite games? Did she and her sisters play games? Or what did they do when they had spare time? Were they active and athletic, played sport of any sort? And I'd ask these questions of Dorrit to ask Livia. Now here's the thing, Dorrit, Livia's daughter, when she got on the phone to me and she sent me an email saying, I never thought to ask my mother those questions. I thought I knew everything there was to know about my mother. Well, of course, we don't. And as Pam and Odette and Toronto, Livia's son and daughter-in-law will tell you, that they think and they are so much connected with their mum, who has told them all about her time and her life. But those little details. Did you have long hair when you were a girl? So simple. And it doesn't mean anything, but it helps you know somebody a little bit better. Anyway, we had this amazing conversation. Absolutely cracked me up at one point. I'd asked Livia something and she couldn't remember. And so she jumps on her landline phone. Her and Dorrit are on the phone with me and looking at me. Next thing, Livia's on the phone and she rings her sister Magda. And they're speaking in Hebrew, but I can tell that Livia's getting a little bit hot under the collar. And Dorrit confirmed it with me because Dorrit starts laughing and her head off. And Livia couldn't remember something. So she rings up her 96-year-old sister and says, do you remember what I just asked her? And clearly Magda's saying back, no, she can't remember. And so Livia was chastising her. Why can you not remember what I can't remember? I'm relying on you remembering what I can't remember. It was hilarious and absolutely made my week watching this amazing woman have this conversation that I didn't need to understand the language to know what was going on between these two sisters, because they were speaking to each other the way siblings speak. You can say anything and it's always being said with love and with affection, and the ribbing is genuine and never ever offence taken. So that was just something else that's happened to me since I last connected with you. And that played out for me too, by the way, because about 4 or 5 days ago, I got onto a Zoom chat with my 3 children, and watching them once again as only siblings can behave, with the kind of jokes slinging at each other and the ribbing and carrying on. It was quite wonderful. And as the mother, I got to join in occasionally, but I get most enjoyment actually out of just watching the three of them, well, having to behave in front of a camera the way they would behave if they were together in person. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to say au revoir, and I will see you again in 3 weeks. I will have a special guest with me. We may or may not promote who it is beforehand. Probably will. Yeah, stay tuned and check it out. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. Remember that word resilience. Look for it in yourself. Look for it in others. It's there. And you all have a wonderful 3 weeks. I'm going to get stuck into finishing, well, not finishing, but working on the story that I'm writing that I'll bring to you in 12 months' time. So for now, it's a late night here in Melbourne now. Everybody in Australia, go to bed. And for the rest of you, have a wonderful day. I'll see you in 3 weeks' time. Bye-bye.